In 1984, a quiet engineer bought a failing textile empire for a symbolic franc. He kept one name, Christian Dior. Everything else was cut, sold, or shut. So how did Bernard Arnault turn that instinct into the largest luxury group in the world? Born in the industrial city of Roubaix in northern France, Bernard Jean-Étienne Arnault arrived on the 5th of March, 1949. He grew up in a well-off but disciplined household. His father, Jean-Léon Arnault, was a manufacturer who ran a successful construction and civil engineering firm called Ferret Savinel. His mother, Marie-Joseph Savinel, was a trained pianist with a deep love of culture and a fascination for Dior. Under the influence of a devoutly Catholic grandmother, the young Arnault was raised with strict values and a strong work ethic. He took piano lessons and developed an early appreciation for classical music, a genteel pursuit that would later mirror his affinity for the arts and elegant design. As a boy in the 1950s, he witnessed the diligence of his entrepreneurial family and imbibed the idea that building something enduring required both vision and discipline. In school, he proved an excellent student, attending elite lycées in Lille and Roubaix. By his late teens, he had set his sights on France's most prestigious engineering university, the École Polytechnique in Paris. Arnault entered École Polytechnique in the late 1960s and graduated in 1971 with a degree in engineering. Rather than pursue a conventional engineering career, the young graduate opted to join his father's mid-size construction business, Ferret Savinel. Even at 22, Arnault had larger ambitions than pouring concrete. He observed that the French construction market was saturated and low margin, while real estate development offered more promise. After only a few years in the firm, the future magnate demonstrated a boldness that would become his trademark. He convinced his cautious father to sell off the company's entire construction division and pivot into property development. In 1975 and 1976, acting on Bernard's proposal, Ferret Savinel liquidated its construction assets and rebranded as Ferenel, refocusing on upscale real estate ventures. At just 26 years old, Arnault became president of the family company in 1978, having effectively taken the helm of the new real estate enterprise he had championed. This early episode, a son persuading his father to remake the family business, showcased Arnault's powers of persuasion and his willingness to take strategic risks. "When something has to be done, do it," he often said, reflecting on the importance of decisiveness. Throughout the late 1970s, Arnault developed residential properties, including holiday resorts, and rode a wave of real estate success. But a major change in France's political climate sent him looking for opportunity elsewhere. In 1981, a socialist government under François Mitterrand came to power, heralding higher taxes and a hostile climate for private wealth. The 30-something Arnault made the unusual decision to move his young family to the United States. In the early 1980s, he settled in the New York area and later in Palm Beach, Florida, expanding the family's property business on American soil. This self-imposed exile lasted about 3 years, during which Arnault absorbed the dynamic, bold style of American business. It was the era of leveraged buyouts and corporate raiders on Wall Street. Arnault befriended neighbors like John Klug, a U.S. media magnate, and observed the aggressive tactics of financiers at firms like Drexel Burnham Lambert. These experiences sharpened his instincts and ignited a vision in him that went far beyond building condos or hotels. He later confessed that during this period, he began seeking a business with French roots and international reach, something he could scale up to a global level. An oft-recounted anecdote from Arnault's time in New York would prove fateful. One morning in the late 1970s, Arnault struck up a conversation with a taxi driver about France. Did the cabbie know the French president, Valéry Giscard d'Estaing, or perhaps Georges Pompidou? The driver shrugged. French politics meant nothing to him. But when Arnault asked if he had heard of Christian Dior, the man's face lit up with recognition. The world knew Dior, the Parisian house of high fashion, even if it didn't know French presidents. Arnault would never forget the reach and power of that iconic brand. This encounter crystallized his belief that global brands have a lasting influence, and that luxury names carry a cultural cachet far beyond their home turf. While others might have chuckled at basing a business strategy on a cabbie's remark, Arnault intuited a profound truth. In the modern world, prestige brands could be more enduring and influential than political regimes. By 1984, France's economy was changing again, and an extraordinary opportunity was about to knock. A once mighty French textile conglomerate called Boussac Saint-Frère had slid into bankruptcy. Boussac was an old-fashioned empire built on textiles, diapers, and retail stores, but it owned a jewel that gleamed even in ruin, the house of Christian Dior. Dior was the crown of French haute couture, a globally revered name in fashion, but its parent company, Boussac, was insolvent and on the auction block. The French government, eager to save jobs, was seeking a buyer to rescue Boussac and its assets. Most potential suitors were scared off by Boussac's mountain of debt and bloated payroll. But Bernard Arnault, at 35, immediately zeroed in on Dior, the very name that had captivated his mother in his childhood, the brand even New York cabbies knew. Here was the enterprise with French roots and international reach he had been dreaming of. Seizing the chance required all the boldness and capital Arnault could muster. He didn't have enough money to buy Boussac outright, so he turned to Antoine Bernheim, a well-connected partner at Lazare Frères Bank and a family friend. With Bernheim's help, Arnault engineered a leveraged buyout of Boussac in 1984, investing roughly $15 million of his own and borrowing about $65 million more from Lazare and others. He also partnered with a holding company called Financière Agache, which he soon took over as CEO. In a complex transaction, Arnault acquired Boussac Saint-Frère for a symbolic French franc, essentially free, in exchange for taking on its massive obligations. It was a high-stakes gamble. Overnight, the young developer from Roubaix became the owner of a sprawling but crumbling empire that included factories, department stores, a fashion house, and thousands of employees looking to him for salvation. Arnault's singular goal, however, was to get Dior, and now he had it. The next challenge was turning this distressed conglomerate around. The new owner proved to be unsentimental and laser-focused. He realized that most of Boussac's businesses were hopelessly uncompetitive. So, over the next 2 years, Arnault executed a drastic downsizing. He shuttered factories, liquidated subsidiaries, and laid off around 9,000 workers, sparing only the core assets he deemed valuable, notably the Christian Dior couture house and the Le Bon Marché department store in Paris. These cuts were brutal in the eyes of the French public. Arnault had initially given the government the impression he would be a savior for the whole company. When officials later protested that he had promised to preserve jobs, Arnault coolly replied that his only pledge was to make the company profitable. Such cold efficiency earned him a chilling nickname in the French press, the Terminator. Many were shocked that a young businessman would so readily jettison venerable divisions, including Boussac's textile mills, dating back to the 19th century, in order to save an haute couture brand that at the time was a money-losing vanity project. Yet from Arnault's perspective, these moves were not wanton brutality, but necessary surgery to excise the cancers killing the company. He later pointed out that Dior's couture division, though unprofitable on paper, was the wellspring of the brand's prestige. As Arnault saw it, a good product can last forever, and the Dior name, properly managed, was an eternal asset. He proved willing to sacrifice short-term sentiment and even his reputation in France's political circles to ensure Dior survived and could flourish. Critics howled, but within 3 years, the revitalized Dior was vindicating Arnault's strategy. By 1987, the slimmed-down company, now essentially Dior and a few retail assets, returned to profitability, earning around $112 million on nearly $2 billion in revenue. Arnault had taken a moribund enterprise and brought the books into the black, as promised. In the process, he had leapfrogged from running a modest family firm to commanding one of France's most famous luxury marquets. Admirers marveled that he had vaulted from a $15 million business to an empire 20 times that size. At age 38, the rising tycoon had made good on the audacious bet that opened our story. With Christian Dior as his cornerstone, Bernard Arnault began casting around for his next major move. He understood that Dior alone, while prestigious, was just one piece of a much larger luxury puzzle. In the late 1980s, an opportunity emerged to assemble an even grander empire, but this time it would involve outmaneuvering some of the most established names in French business. The stage was set for a boardroom battle that would become legend, Arnault's takeover of LVMH. The luxury conglomerate LVMH, Moët Hennessy Louis Vuitton, did not exist until 1987. It was formed by a merger between Louis Vuitton, the famed maker of leather trunks and handbags, and Moët Hennessy, a leading producer of champagne and cognac. This merger was engineered in part by Vuitton's patriarch, Henri Racamier, as a defensive move, combining two heritage firms he thought would ward off any hostile raiders. But the union was an uneasy one. Almost immediately, a power struggle ignited between Racamier and Moët Hennessy's CEO, Alain Chevalier. By 1988, Racamier, then in his late 70s and desperate to gain an upper hand, looked for an ally who could invest in LVMH and support him. He turned to Bernard Arnault, the dynamic new owner of Dior, and invited him to join as a major stakeholder in the merged group. Arnault agreed to invest in LVMH, but the wily Racamier would soon regret bringing this ally into the fold. Almost immediately, Arnault sensed an opening to take control for himself. He quietly partnered with outside investors, including the British drinks company Guinness plc, to amass a formidable stake. In July 1988, Arnault and Guinness set up a joint venture and spent roughly $1.6 billion to purchase 24% of LVMH's stock. This made Arnault one of the largest shareholders of LVMH overnight. When word spread that the Vuitton family might be trying to reclaim control by buying up shares, Arnault moved even faster. He shelled out another $600 million to raise his stake by an additional 13.5%, becoming the single biggest shareholder of LVMH by late 1988. The stage was set for a coup. As one observer noted wryly, the conglomerate had been created on the premise that it would be too large to fall prey to a raider, but that premise failed to account for internal takeover attempts. Arnault was executing exactly that, a takeover from within. Henri Racamier soon realized, to his horror, that his white knight investor had outflanked him. In January 1989, sensing his moment, Arnault struck. He spent another $500 million to bring his ownership to 43.5% of LVMH shares, with about 35% of voting rights. This gave him what in France is called a blocking minority. enough power to veto any major decisions and prevent the group from being broken up. Racamier fought back furiously, taking the battle to the courts, but it was too late. In January 1989, LVMH's board, perhaps seeing the tide turning, unanimously elected Bernard Arnault as chairman of the executive board. The old guard was vanquished. Arnault promptly ousted Racamier from the board and removed the remaining Louis Vuitton family executives from power. In less than a year, the supposed savior had become the conqueror. The French press, astonished, dubbed Arnault the wolf in Cashmere for the genteel yet predatory manner in which he had seized France's most glamorous business. This boardroom drama was one of the fiercest battles in French fashion history. Arnault's victory in the LVMH struggle cemented his reputation, depending on whom you asked, as either a visionary leader or a ruthless corporate raider. In truth, he was a bit of both. To his admirers, Arnault was now the undisputed captain of the world's mightiest luxury group, ready to rejuvenate storied brands like Louis Vuitton and Moët and Chandon with modern business acumen. To his detractors, he had imported an Anglo-Saxon style of hostile takeovers and mass layoffs into the genteel world of French luxury. Arnault himself, typically reserved and cool-headed, did not gloat publicly. He simply set about proving that he could grow LVMH to new heights without destroying what made its houses great. Years later, reflecting on his leadership philosophy, he remarked, "All that interests me is promoting my brands, never myself." Indeed, Arnault often stayed out of the limelight personally, preferring to elevate the mystique of names like Dior, Louis Vuitton, or Dom Pérignon. Having secured control, Bernard Arnault wasted no time developing LVMH into a true luxury powerhouse. In the 1990s, he went on an acquisition spree almost unprecedented in the luxury sector. His guiding criterion was simple: only the very best, most prestigious brands, what he called star brands, deserved a place in his portfolio. In Arnault's mind, a star brand had to be timeless and modern at once, rooted in heritage yet growing fast and generating high profits. If a target company didn't meet those standards, Arnault wasn't interested, but many did, and he went shopping. Fashion, leather goods, perfumes, jewelry, watches, even newspapers and yachts. Arnault selectively scooped up companies in all these areas to expand LVMH's reach. One of his early purchases in this wave was Céline, the French leather goods house, acquired in 1988. He took stakes in up-and-coming couture labels too, notably sponsoring the flamboyant designer Christian Lacroix in 1987 to start his own fashion house under the LVMH umbrella. In 1993, Arnault added Berluti, a bespoke shoemaker, and Kenzo, the Parisian fashion label founded by a Japanese designer. That same year, showing his interest in media and influence, he bought the ailing French business newspaper La Tribune. Though despite heavy investment, this venture never thrived, and he later sold La Tribune off at a loss. More successful was his 1994 purchase of Guerlain, the storied French perfume house. In 1996, he acquired Roubaix, the luxury leather brand from Spain. Then came American fashion. In 1997, Arnault brought New York designer Marc Jacobs into the fold, both hiring Jacobs to rejuvenate Louis Vuitton's own lines and acquiring Jacobs's eponymous brand. That year, LVMH also bought Sephora, a French cosmetics retailer that Arnault envisioned expanding worldwide. The role continued. Thomas Pink, a British shirtmaker, in 1999, Emilio Pucci, Florentine fashion house, in 2000, Fendi in 2001, Donna Karan, DKNY, in 2001, La Samaritaine, a historic Paris department store, in 2001, all became part of LVMH's empire. At times, the empire building took on the air of a sports rivalry. As LVMH grew, Arnault's success spurred competitors, notably François Pinault's group, later named Kering, and the Swiss-based Richemont, to snap up luxury brands themselves. A tacit race was on to see who would assemble the most prestigious portfolio. In this high-stakes contest, Arnault usually won. His secret? A blend of financial savvy and understanding of brand allure. He insisted on maintaining each house's identity and quality, even as he enforced financial discipline across the group. In the luxury business, you have to build on heritage, Arnault noted, emphasizing that the legacy and story of each brand were assets to nurture. But at the same time, he imposed modern management practices to improve efficiency. He was fond of saying that if you control distribution, you control the brand's image, a rationale for LVMH's push into its own boutiques and retail channels, instead of relying on third parties. He invested heavily in advertising and glitzy flagship stores, knowing that spectacle and visibility fuel desire. Yet behind the scenes, he insisted on lean operations. Each acquisition was soon rung for synergies. For example, LVMH might consolidate perfume production for Dior and Guerlain in one facility, or use its leather sourcing clout for both Vuitton and Fendi, thereby cutting costs while maintaining quality. This combination, lavish marketing and rigorous manufacturing control, became known as the Arnault formula and transformed LVMH into a profit machine. Even as LVMH grew, Arnault remained deeply involved in creative decisions at his brands. Unlike some conglomerate chiefs who focus only on numbers, Arnault relished the creative side of fashion and luxury. He met frequently with designers across the group, from the couturiers at Dior to the winemakers at Moët, challenging them to innovate, but also aligning their visions with business goals. In one bold stroke in 1996, he shocked the fashion establishment by hiring a brash British designer, John Galliano, to lead Dior, replacing the more traditional Italian Gianfranco Ferré. Critics fumed at the idea of a Brit running France's Temple of Couture, but Arnault shrugged off the naysayers, stating simply that talent has no nationality. Galliano's tenure proved wildly successful creatively, rejuvenating Dior's image for a new generation. Similarly, Arnault gave American designer Marc Jacobs free rein to create Louis Vuitton's first pret-à-porter fashion lines in the late 90s. It's very important that when you have a designer like Marc Jacobs, who is a genius, you give him complete freedom, Arnault said. This patronage of creative talent, combined with Arnault's strategic guidance, yielded some of the era's most acclaimed products, from Louis Vuitton's artist collaboration handbags to Dior's bold couture collections that kept the brand in the headlines. As one luxury insider observed, Arnault had learned to manage creativity for the sake of profit and growth, a rare skill. By the end of the 1990s, Arnault's LVMH was not just a collection of brands. It was a global empire dominating fashion, accessories, fine wines and spirits, cosmetics, and more. Revenues and profits had multiplied many times over since he took charge. The group's market value soared, making LVMH one of the most valuable companies in Europe. Bernard Arnault himself became one of the richest individuals in France, with a fortune tied to the success of the empire he meticulously built. But even emperors faced challenges, and Arnault would soon confront one of the biggest tests of his career, a showdown for control of Gucci, LVMH's fiercest rival, that would humbly remind him that even the wolf in Cashmere could sometimes be outfoxed. The handbag war, as the press dubbed it, erupted in 1999. LVMH had quietly purchased a stake of nearly 5% in Gucci Group, the Italian luxury firm then led by dynamic duo CEO Domenico De Sole and designer Tom Ford. Sensing vulnerability at Gucci, Arnault kept buying on the open market until LVMH suddenly owned 34.4% of Gucci by early 1999. It was an ambush. Arnault insisted he was a friendly investor, but Gucci's management saw a stealth takeover in progress and reacted with panic and ingenuity. In a dramatic counter-move, De Sole and Ford sought a white knight of their own. They struck a deal with Arnault's French rival, François Pinault. Without warning, Gucci's board approved an issue of new shares equivalent to 40% of the company and allocated all of them to Pinault's holding company, PPR, without offering Arnault a single share. Overnight, LVMH's stake was diluted below 25%, and Pinault leapfrogged Arnault to become Gucci's largest shareholder. Arnault was furious. He sued, claiming this maneuver was illegal. Gucci countersued. The fight dragged through courts in Amsterdam and Delaware for over 2 years. In the end, Arnault accepted a settlement in late 2001. LVMH would sell its Gucci shares to Pinault's group, walking away with a hefty profit of around $700 million on the investment, but with nothing to show in terms of control. For once, Bernard Arnault had been bested. He later admitted that losing Gucci was a great regret, a rare instance where his normally flawless timing faltered. The episode taught him a lesson about the importance of speed and transparency in takeover attempts. No longer would he be able to creep up unnoticed on a prize. Future acquisitions would need either the cooperation of the owners or an overwhelming bid from the outset. Chastened but undeterred, Arnault continued expanding LVMH in the new millennium. He refocused on making friendly deals with founding families of coveted brands whenever possible to avoid another Gucci-style battle. In 2001, he succeeded in buying Fendi, the Roman luxury house, by partnering first with Prada and then buying out Prada's stake, a complex but ultimately congenial transaction. A decade later, in 2011, he pulled off a blockbuster-friendly acquisition. Bulgari, the Italian jewelry dynasty, agreed to sell controlling interest to LVMH in exchange for shares, effectively making the Bulgari family one of LVMH's largest shareholders in return. This $5.2 billion deal added one of the world's top jewelers to Arnault's domain and showed how far his empire had come, from scrapping for a slice of Gucci to writing multi-billion-dollar checks to clinch a deal. Arnault's vision was no longer confined to fashion and retail. He ventured into new industries where he saw luxury potential. In the 2000s, he invested in niche technology and retail startups, from an early stake in Netflix to e-commerce ventures, bringing a bit of Silicon Valley spirit into his portfolio. He also branched into upscale hospitality. In 2007, he took a stake in Carrefour, France's largest retailer, and later acquired luxury hotels and resorts through LVMH's hospitality arm. In 2008, he even entered the yacht business, buying prestigious shipyards to cater to wealthy clients' seafaring fantasies. By the 2010s, Arnault's LVMH was a vast constellation of over 70 prestigious brands, with products ranging from champagne to couture to five-star hotels, all targeted at the global elite and aspirational middle class. Despite occasional controversies, Arnault steered LVMH from strength to strength. Under his leadership, the group showed remarkable resilience during economic downturns. When the 2008 global financial crisis hit and luxury spending contracted, LVMH tightened operations, but kept investing in marketing. It emerged with even greater market share once the economy recovered. During the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020, Arnault initially hit pause on a planned $16 billion takeover of American jeweler Tiffany Co. citing concerns about Tiffany's heavy dividend payouts amid losses. A legal tussle ensued, but ultimately, Arnault renegotiated a slightly lower price and consummated the Tiffany acquisition in January 2021. It was classic Arnault, tough in negotiation, patient in strategy, and ultimately successful. With Tiffany under LVMH, Arnault added another glittering pillar to his empire, extending his reach deeply into the US jewelry market. As the years passed, the once reserved young man from the north of France grew into a seasoned statesman of luxury. He took on a role almost like France's unofficial ambassador of high culture. "I see myself as an ambassador of French heritage," Arnault said, and indeed his empire had become a guardian of centuries-old craft traditions, quoteswise.com. Through LVMH, he ensured that artisans who made champagne, cognac, silk scarves, or hand-stitched handbags could thrive in the modern global economy. The French establishment, which had eyed him warily in the 1980s, began to acknowledge that Arnault had helped save and elevate brands that are national treasures. His personal net worth climbed into the tens of billions, and by the 2020s, he frequently traded the title of world's richest person with the likes of Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk, yet he often downplayed the significance of wealth. "Money is just a consequence," Arnault would tell his team. If they focused on excellence, he assured them, the profits would naturally follow. This philosophy helped keep his managers focused on long-term brand value over short-term gains. Alongside business, Arnault invested in philanthropy and the arts, reflecting his cultured upbringing. Perhaps his most visible legacy here is the Louis Vuitton Foundation, a contemporary art museum and cultural centers he opened in Paris in 2014. Years in the making and housed in an audacious glass structure designed by architect Frank Gehry, the museum stands as a monument to Arnault's passion for art and architecture. He personally collaborated with Gehry and oversaw the project, reportedly spending hundreds of millions of euros through LVMH to bring it to life. The Louis Vuitton Foundation has since hosted exhibitions of modern masters and attracted millions of visitors, underscoring Arnault's belief that great businesses must nourish culture, not just commerce. In addition, Arnault has sponsored young artists, supported France's patrimony, for instance donating generously to the restoration of Notre Dame Cathedral after the 2019 fire, and sat on the board of prestigious institutions. These endeavors have gradually softened his image from that of a pure profit-driven Terminator to a patron of the arts in the tradition of Europe's great philanthropists. Through it all, Bernard Arnault's family has been central to his story. His personal life, while largely kept discreet, saw some changes over the years. He married his first wife, Anne de Wavrin, in the early 1970s and had 2 children with her, Delphine, born 1975, and Antoine, born 1977. As Arnault's business empire grew, however, the marriage suffered and the couple separated in 1990. In 1991, Arnault remarried, this time to Hélène Mercier, a Canadian-born classical pianist, a fitting partner for a man who cherished music. With Hélène, he had 3 more sons, Alexandre, born 1992, Frédéric, 1995, and Jean, 1998. Despite the demands of business, Arnault remained a devoted father, and over time he actively involved his children in the LVMH empire. In fact, the Arnault clan became something of a luxury dynasty. By the 2020s, all 5 of his children held roles in the business. Delphine Arnault worked her way up in the group, and in 2023 was appointed CEO of Dior, the very house that started it all. Antoine Arnault took charge of communications and image for LVMH and became CEO of the family's holding company. He also chairs brands like Berluti and Loro Piana. The younger sons entered the fray too. Alexandre became an executive vice president at Tiffany Co. Frédéric took the helm of Tag Heuer, a storied Swiss watchmaker in the LVMH stable, and Jean joined Louis Vuitton's watch division. In an unusual but carefully planned move, Bernard Arnault ensured that each child would have an equal ownership stake in the family holding, Agaché, that controls LVMH, a strategy aimed at preventing infighting and preserving his life's work for the next generation. Observers often speculate who will ultimately succeed him as LVMH's leader, but Arnault characteristically keeps his cards close, simply stating that as long as he is able, he will continue to lead the team to the top. Today, in his mid-70s, Bernard Arnault sits at the pinnacle of a luxury empire that he built through vision, tenacity, and not a little contrivance. The shy, calculating young man who once staked everything on Christian Dior has become the architect of a new model of luxury conglomerate. LVMH, now comprising 75 brands and counting, is the world's largest and most valuable luxury goods company, valued at hundreds of billions of dollars. Its products reach every corner of the globe, tantalizing consumers with the promise of refinement and exclusivity. Arnault's approach, blending creative freedom with operational rigor, has proven enduring. Under his watch, venerable houses like Louis Vuitton and Dior have remained timeless, yet at the utmost level of modernity, as he likes to describe them. Meanwhile, he has shown an uncanny ability to spot and acquire rising stars, from niche perfumers to luxury streetwear labels, keeping the group at the cutting edge of taste. From the quiet boy who grew up playing classical piano in provincial Roubaix, to the hard-nosed deal-maker barging into boardrooms, to the elder statesman reflecting on legacy, Bernard Arnault's journey has been anything but ordinary. His story illustrates how a strategic mind, when paired with patience and passion, can reshape an entire industry. He has navigated recessions, fierce competition, and public controversies, at one point even provoking national outrage by exploring a move to Belgium to escape French taxes, a plan he eventually dropped amidst criticism and later affirmed his loyalty to France. Through highs and lows, Arnault remained steadfast in his focus: build the brands, and the brands will build the business. In an interview, he summed up his guiding principle: don't worry too much about profitability. If you do your job well, the profitability will come. In other words, nurture excellence. The rest is just a consequence. As we conclude the tale of Bernard Arnault, it's clear how that audacious gamble in 1984 set the stage for everything to come. By insisting on the value of Dior's name when others saw only liabilities, Arnault unlocked a new paradigm in luxury. He kept Dior's flame alive, then used its spark to ignite a whole constellation of brands. Decades later, the 1 franc purchase of Dior has blossomed into a multinational group that defines luxury in the modern age. Arnault himself, ever modest in demeanor, would credit the designers, artisans, and managers who execute the vision day to day. But none of it would have happened without his uncanny foresight and relentless drive. From New York cab rides to Paris boardrooms, from cutting jobs to creating tens of thousands more, from acquiring museums to mentoring his children, Bernard Arnault's life has been the pursuit of an ideal, the marriage of heritage and innovation in the service of luxury. And in achieving it, he has written his name into the annals of global business, not with a flourish of ego, but with the enduring signatures of Christian Dior, Louis Vuitton, Moët Hennessy, and all the illustrious houses now under his care. The boy from Roubaix became the Pope of fashion, the wolf in Cashmere who transformed into the shepherd of luxury's past and future. And as the brands he stewards continue to captivate the world, the legend of Bernard Arnault, the man who kept the name on the box and built an empire around it, will remain an inspiration in every finely crafted product that bears his indelible influence.